Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. I hope all is well. Let's move on to Africa. This is an interesting interview in France 24 with the Assistant US Secretary of State for Africa, Tibor Nagy. And what's interesting is him trying to square what's happening in the DR Congo with the outcome. So we have one Bouteflika in hospital in Geneva, a second Bouteflika who sacked his campaign manager, and a third who submitted his candidacy. Take you back to Kapuscinski, Shah of Shahs. If the crowd disperses, goes home, does not reassemble, we say the revolution is over. They're seeing the biggest crowds they've ever seen. And Friday, which is always dangerous in the Muslim world because it's a religious day, and anything happens, it inflames people, there's going to be a huge march on Friday. Le Monde says, trop peu, trop tard, too little, too late. And I again go to Kapuscinski, Shah of Shahs. The choice of that moment is the greatest riddle of history, saying that, people keep a score, authority provokes revolution, it occurs when a feeling of impunity takes root among the elite. Without anything, we can do anything. It is a delusion, but it rests on a certain rational foundation, because for a while, it does indeed look as if they can do whatever they want. At the same time, it says people keep a detailed account of the wrongs, which at one particular moment are to be added up. The choice of that moment is the greatest riddle of history. And then that took me back to Albert Camus, who of course was in Algeria for a lot of the time, who said it is better to burn than to disappear. Zimbabwe's Mthuli Cube touts the economy amid shortages and inflation surge. In a very bullish interview with Bloomberg, he said, Zimbabwe is certainly on its way to a better place on the fiscal front because we're managing to walk the talk, he said. Zimbabwe is the cheapest buy in Africa, and it has just gotten cheaper. I think we're back in the game. Inflation, which peaked at an estimated 500 billion% in 2008, has risen sharply to 56.9% in January, but in reality the price growth is probably significantly faster, according to Stephen Hanke. Trump, of course, I'm continuing for 1 year the national emergency declared in Executive Order 13288, extending the US sanctions against Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe says its rapprochement with the West is still on, despite US sanctions. They've also shoveling out $500,000 annually to pay the US lobbying firm Ballard Partners, headed by a top Trump fundraiser, to lobby the Trump administration. This is according to Politico. Tamsin Fremantle, who's at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, says, are they paying in electronic money or bond notes? Surely not in actual dollars. Very droll. South African all share up 6.33% this year. A lot must be to do with 10 cent. Dollar versus rand, the rand back towards the lower end of the range, 14.261. Egyptian pound, 17.47. Nigerian all share up 2.2% year to date. Ghana Stock Exchange down 2.37% year to date. Vivo Energy posted a higher profit and volumes. Company distributes and markets Shell-branded fuels and lubricants in Africa. Said gross profit rose to $624 million last year from $614 million a year earlier. Expects volumes to hit around 10 billion litres this year following the completion of its acquisition of a subsidiary of South African retail firm Engen on March the 1st. Looking at entry into the Nigerian and South African markets, gross cash unit margin last year dropped 1% to $74 per 1,000 litres, which Vivo Energy blamed on consumer activism in Morocco. They're looking to open between 8 to 100 new retail service stations across 23 countries in which it operates. I've done an interview about the Tanzanian shilling. It's basically, the problem is that it's a continuous real-time vote on the state of Tanzania, and Magufuli's instinct was to switch it off entirely, which I argue is a fool's errand, and therefore the risk of an asymmetric downside move is very high now. I go back to Mrs. Thatcher, there's no way in which one can buck the market. Mozambique's Eurobonds have taken a turn for the worse. They were the biggest gainers last year, bottom of the pile this year. This is all the hoo-ha, the arrest of Chang, the arrest of Gobeza's son, and now the Attorney General in Mozambique is trying to, the exact term is void the loan, or is it void or is it something else, but with Credit Suisse, so bonds are underperforming. But look at that graph, you'll see Kenya's bonds are the top performers, and that's Kenya Eurobond performance, and this is all to do with the downshifting in US interest curve shift, and that boosted frontier and sub-Saharan African sovereign debt prices, and essentially this is an attractive level for the government to issue at. And that's why I was saying that, they're looking to do a $3.5 billion call. Whilst we have to deal with the balance sheet, a $3.5 billion call now is tactically the right call, because look at what's happened in the Eurobond market. Kenya shilling, of course, is playing around with the 100 level, unable to break it for now. It's probably, the central bank is probably holding it back, I would have thought. I expect it to strengthen further, and actually on the chart it goes as high as 92. Nairobi all shares up 10.09% this year. KCB reported full year earnings yesterday. Earnings per share up 21.773%. They're opening up in China, and it remains a singular East African franchise. Flights have resumed at JKIA. Just so you're clear, because there's been a lot of debate about it, this is the Kenya Airways shareholding. The correct position is shown in the graph below. I was on BBC earlier talking about this issue, and I'm happy to engage if that's something you're interested in. I was talking about the India-Pakistan standoff and saying that these might be salad days for the tea crew, like it once was for the coffee kings when we were coffee kingpins in the 1970s, when Brazil's crop was knocked out by a frost, saying basically Pakistan are going to buy more tea from us rather than India. Thank you so much. I do appreciate it.